still need to have breakfast together, because I mentioned it in this a number of months ago. We must be involved. Absolutely, positively must be involved in this neighborhood. It is the only way it will continue to improve. We cannot think of this neighborhood as one that we come to work in and go home and hopefully everything will be better because of that. We have to actively get involved in this neighborhood. That is a message that I've carried to everybody, whether it's the University of Oregon or Mercy Corps or the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine or Northwest Evaluation Associates or any of the businesses that are down there. And I'll get back to the Uwajimaya story as well. But I think that's very, very important. Number two, I think we have to figure out what we think the future of these historic districts need to be. I have my own opinion, but that's purely that, my own opinion. But we have to decide that, and there have been a number of factors that have been discussed over the last number of years about the future of those historic districts. That landmark district is important, and we have to treat it with care, but everybody's got a different opinion as to what that is. We've got to decide what it is, and I think you all have to actively participate in that. You are moving into a National Register building. That's important. We structured that, and Dr. Gator structured that in a way that, and Brad and Pete structured in a way that something is going to be built around you, but there's going to be a separation between your building and whatever does get built around you, and that's great. But that's going to happen. We need to continue to push job creation, because right now, that's what our agency is focusing on, singularly focusing on, job creation. Now, we need to figure out what that means in the context of Old Town Chinatown. And that's something that our agency is discussing with a lot of vigor right now. And then the third is, how does housing fit into that particular picture? So with all of that, let me come back to Uwajimaya, and I'm almost done. Uwajimaya, I think, absolutely had their heart in the right place. They were instrumental in the improvement of the International District in Seattle. Their store down there is, if you've ever been there, how many people have been to the Uwajimaya store? It's a great store. It's an incredible store. It's got housing above it, the Moriguchi family, and it's a family-owned business, and it's got its own very interesting history. Did that development on purpose and are continuing to see how that international district can improve. I think they wanted to do something very similar in Old Town Chinatown, but opening a grocery store is a big deal. It is a very, very long-term commitment. You do not make money when you first open a grocery store. The margins in the grocery business are tiny, very, very tiny. So the whole business model in the grocery business is that you set a very, very long-term lease. You make sure you can survive the first number of years and hope that and set your rent so that your business grows a heck of a lot more than your rent does, and ultimately you make a lot of money. Uwajimaya had a lot of other work that they had in front of them as well. They decided to open up a third store in Seattle, in Renton, at the same time, plus they had a store in Bellevue that they had to reconfigure because they were losing their lease, and their Bellevue store was very successful. So they had a lot on their plate. In that, we also had a recession. And so with all of those factors, Uwajimaya started to be unsure as to whether they were going to continue to be interested in opening a new store in Old Town Chinatown. It was the single most important project that everybody at the Portland Development Commission wanted to achieve. And I can say that with confidence because our chair has said many, many times, Scott Andrews, who is a venerable force in Portland, said if there's one question that everybody asks me about as chair of the Portland Development Commission is when is Uwajimaya going to come? Bruce Warner, our old executive director, when he left, when it was asked if there's one project you'd like to see happen after you leave, what would it be? Uwajimaya. There was nobody that I asked ever who said that they didn't want it there, and everybody would always ask us, you know, when are they coming? What's going on with all of that? I said, I know. And ultimately, it was really good that they decided that they couldn't make it happen, because nobody wanted to be responsible for that project not moving forward. The property owner, David Cole, didn't want to be responsible for that project moving forward. There was not a political elected official who didn't want to try to get that project to move forward. And there was nobody in the neighborhood who didn't want to get that thing to move forward as well. So I think it was a noble, honestly, a noble decision by Eli Chavaya to not move forward. In the meantime, the property owner, who also owns the property to the south, and he is a very key factor, and I'm going to do a little bit of going backwards to explain to you why, has moved ahead with an international youth hostel that's going to have a very Asian theme associated with it, right on Burnside. David Gold and Howard Davis bought what we call the Goldsmith blocks right around the same time that I started working this district in 2005. And what they ultimately did was something very, very similar to what Brad Mawson has done very, very successfully on the east side. And that is treat their buildings like a museum. They curate it. And David took this building that was essentially a warehouse and a furniture showroom and brought in a number of artists and some businesses. I think when David first filled the building, he was about 70% artists, 30% businesses. And he also opened up a nonprofit art center right on the corner of 5th and Cooch. It was called the Portland Art Center. And that complemented a whole row of stores that at the time he didn't own, and some of which had been there a while, and some of which were starting to open at the time. And that is that row of restaurants and stores that are along 5th Avenue there. Just Be Toys has been there since 2000. Backspace came in right around the time that PDC came in. Sunday Lounge a couple of years later. Ford's on 5th, which is now Theo's. And then ultimately what was Three Lions Bakery and now is a very successful Davis Street Tavern. That row flourished because of what David was doing at the Goldsmith blocks. He did not own this building where he was doing the International Hostel at the time. It was, to be honest with you, it was a flop house. And Randy Leonard figured out a way to condemn the building and forced the sale of the building to the public sector, and then we've in turn recently sold it to David and his partners. But bringing the arts into Old Town Chinatown, I think, was also a very, very key factor. And for many years, I would tell people that First Thursday isn't a Pearl District event anymore. It's as much an Old Town Chinatown event as it is a Pearl District event. And a couple of other things really helped move that forward. And that the other really most important thing was the conversion of the old Daisy Kingdom. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, that's right.
I always like that sometimes. I have to make sure I use the right names. The Daisy Kingdom building, which was an old DeSoto auto showroom, and had an elevator that could take cars up all four floors. Convert that into a place where gallery owners could own their space, both nonprofit and for-profit. Jim Winkler, a very creative developer in town and a supporter of the arts, took that building and did exactly that, because there were a lot of gallery owners who were getting forced out of that neighborhood. And he wanted to figure out a way to make sure that they were going to be able to stick around for many, many years. So that's a condominium, and he was able to redevelop that building in much the same kind of creative financial way that OCOM finally got their project completed using these fancy tools of due-market tax credits and historic tax credits. And then he also got an architecture firm to buy the second floor as well. And that's key because it's not only what was going on in Chinatown, but what was going on in Jim Winkler's building and what had always been going on in the Everett Street lofts. So the arts community has really flourished. And the thing that has flourished since is software. So a lot of the tenants who occupy a lot of the other buildings in Old Town Chinatown are in the creative industries and in the software industries, and there's a lot of overlap between the two. And that's resulted in a fairly strong market, fairly strong market. The Nato family still owns a number of buildings down there, and they've been able to slowly increase many of their rents. So hopefully that gives you a general picture of where things came from and where they are today, what's important, and how we need to bring new people into this community and how they actively need to be involved. What we did in order to continue our involvement is we did a very large amendment to our urban renewal district so that we could continue to have investment in Old Town Chinatown. So we took some of the wealth that we created in the Pearl District and made it so that we could continue investment in the same way in the heart of Old Town Chinatown. And we went building by building to see which parts of the district that we wanted to improve. But it is going to take a lot of new people coming in and taking control and ownership of what had been carried by a number of people for many, many years. When I think about that neighborhood, I think about the people who have been involved and put a lot of heart and soul into that neighborhood. And you guys are very much included in that. Brad and Pete are very much included in that. A guy named Howard Weiner, who runs Livability and has for, and was chairman of the neighborhood, is very involved in that. The Calbear family and Phil Calbear and Patrick Gortmaker are very important in that. Saturday Market will always be an important picture in that. But this isn't going to continue. This momentum isn't going to keep happening unless we all get very, very involved. And there are a lot of different ways in which we can do that. Continuing to attract other folks to come into this neighborhood and not look at those things that continue to prevail as negativity in the neighborhood and think about all the great things that have happened. That's why I talk about $100 million in investment, tens of thousands of visits to the neighborhood that weren't happening before, and literally 1,000 new jobs that weren't there 5 years ago. Some of those are jobs that came from other areas, and some of them are created new jobs, and some of which are yours. So that's huge. That's a big difference. Let's build on that. Let's take that and take it to the next level. We're not going to be able to do Uwajimaya, so let's do something else, and let's figure out exactly what that is. And that's where we are right now. We'd like to figure out where, how we might be able to start working on the south of what I call the core of Chinatown, between 3rd and 5th Avenue. Make sure there's a connection between where you guys are around Ankeny Burnside and that area. Continue to work on those buildings that we've never been able to fix them up, work with Chinese associations. And you know, part of this takes a lot of relationship building, a lot of relationship building. And I'm hoping that we are now at a place where we can leverage those relationships, because we've taken numbers of years to build those relationships. And this is the last thing I'll say, that's why it's been so important for the commitment that this organization has made, even though you haven't been down there. It blew me away that the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine was not only a major sponsor, but also how many of you came down and how many of your students came down during the Autumn Moon Festival that we had a number of years ago. It just showed the kind of investment that you want to make in this particular community, and we have to keep doing that. It's going to take a while for this to flip, but we're close. We really, really are. And it's hard to necessarily see on the ground, especially when there's some negative press that happens. But if you go down there every day, there's a lot more people walking around in business suits. There's a lot more people in those cafes. Floyd's does very well. Backspace does very well. There is a competition to occupy the first floor of that International Youth Hostel. So people are just dying to get into that place. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So there are a lot of things that we can build on, and I look forward to your creativity in figuring that out.
I just want to stop here at this point and say that this is a great example and representation of the Portland Development Commission and the incredible support that the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine was able to secure through the help of Peter and Kevin and Bernie and a host of other people from the Development Commission who really helped us to materialize this dream. That's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is Brad Mousen and Pete Aikspieler, and I was wondering if you could take some time before we open it up for questions to talk about our project and your involvement. I would just preface it by pointing out again, we could not have done this were it not for the belief in the project of people like Peter and his colleagues, or the belief in this project with Brad and Pete. Because I have to honestly tell you that there were so many times that this thing could have been deep sixed for a plethora of reasons, most of which were out of our control. But we knew intuitively and from a logical standpoint that this was a very important move for the college to strategically position it for the future. For a long time after I'm gone and some of the people sitting in this room are gone, the college will be placed exactly where it needs to be for the long-term future. Brad and Pete, when I first met them, it was a very interesting experience because people told me that it was hard to get to Brad and that he would only give you a few minutes, and so you better have your act together.
I've become a lot more patient.
And since that time, you know, we got together, and within 3 minutes, when I found out that he was from New York and he found out that I was from New York, and both were partly Sicilian, I mean, it was a marriage made in heaven. And poor Pete's been on the roller coaster ride, helping us with this, even to this day. So let me just ask if you two can pick up where Peter about what the project has meant for you and Taylor.
I guess I'd like to start out by just reinforcing what Peter mentioned about your commitment to the neighborhood and how impressive it is, and really to thank you. As both Peter and Michael mentioned, there's been several points along this project, which really started about 5 years ago, where the project could have been derailed. And every time that I needed support from the neighborhood, I got it, and I didn't have to ask. It was just a no-brainer. Everybody in the neighborhood is so excited to have your school come and be a member of that community, and it's because of your efforts early on, and it really had a huge impact on the success of this project. It really made things easy for us. I just want to thank you for that. In terms of the project, we spent about 4 years getting the project teed up, and we'll spend about 1 year getting the project done, which is kind of how our world works. It may seem a little backwards to you guys, but that's really how these kinds of projects work, and it's worth it. I think you'll end up in a better building, a better financial position in that building because we took that time, and it was really an aligning of the stars in terms of availability of money, cost of money, availability of contractors, costs of contractors and materials. Everything came together very nicely for the school, and I think going forward that will set you guys up for a very strong position, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I want to bring you up to date on sort of the history of the project. We broke ground in June of this year. Right off the bat, we hit another kind of roadblock, which was now that we're past it, it's a funny historical story, which is we needed to strengthen the footings for the building and the columns going up through the building, so we had to excavate down into below the slab, and we found some artifacts, and so we had to stop and document those artifacts, and we collected those artifacts, and those artifacts are yours now, and so when you move in, you'll get to decide what you want to do with those. But it's a very interesting collection of the history of the neighborhood that you're going into, and I think it's very complementary to your mission. We found one bottle that's Dr. Somebody's stomach bitters, and a lot of pharmaceutical bottles, and a lot of Japanese, sort of pottery, and so it's very interesting, and it to me kind of fit the whole notion of your mission in coming into the neighborhood. So that will be fun. That was a little bit of a roadblock, but not much at all. It was, we had to stop and document it, but kept on going. We're making very good progress. We have demoed all of the stuff that needs to be pulled out of the building and are now working our way up through the building, pouring our floors, our new concrete floors. We've got floors 1 and 2 poured. I think they're working on floor 3 this week, and that's where I'm going next, is to see how that's going. Once that happens, and they've already started the framing of the 4th floor, they're going to finish that at the 5th floor and come out with sort of a donut that will serve as the ceiling of the 4th floor. That should happen by the end of November. The windows will start to come in, and so once that happens, you won't see much as you drive by, but that's a major accomplishment for us. We're going to get the building sealed in, and then all winter long, they're going to work on making the inside of the building what you guys need it to be, which is classrooms and treatment rooms and offices, support space for the school. It's a fun project to work on, it's fun people to work with, and so I'm looking forward to seeing that. One thing I'd also like to talk about is what will happen from here on out. You guys will go into the building sometime in 2012. In my experience, starting with PDC, that's sort of the 3rd leg of the stool, U of O being the 1st leg and Mercy Corps being the 2nd. But there's been a lot of work that PDC has done in that neighborhood that really is setting the neighborhood and your school up for a very successful future. The streetscaping is a great sort of focus for the community, provides this place for events and connection, and I would encourage you to program as much as possible that space. You've got great future development sites, most notably the remainder of Block 8. You've got Block 13 across the street. There's still a story to be told in that neighborhood, and there's definitely going to be something that's going to happen. I think, eventually the post office site will become available for redevelopment. So I think that neighborhood is only going to get better, and it's going to get better in big ways, and you're going to be a part of that. That being said, you're also part of a historic neighborhood. So your portion of the neighborhood is not going to change very much, and that's kind of comforting. It's going to be a very nice, quaint neighborhood with a lot of things going on in it, Saturday market, the events that go on. So I think it's really an exciting place to be in, and I'm excited for you. Goldsmith Blocks is another development site that will happen. You're at the hub of transportation, the Amtrak, the bus station. I think eventually there's going to be further penetration of the streetcar. You've got light rail that comes through. So I think all of these things really are the sort of chemicals that lead to great space making and place making, and you guys are at the epicenter of that. I know when I was working at PDC and PDC came into the neighborhood, that was pretty scary for us. We were sort of trailblazing at the time, and it was really rewarding to see the impact that just 200 employees had on that neighborhood. And we saw a coffee shop going across the street, Backspace, Davis Tavern, Theo's Ping. All of those were reacting to people coming into the neighborhood and sort of serving that. So that's another thing that you can expect to see more of, is additional amenities to make your lives better, easier, funner. And I think Brad and I are both trying to get additional housing into that area as well. And so all of those things are going to make for this just great place for you guys to be. Again, continue being involved. You guys can determine the future of that neighborhood just like we can. So I would encourage you to stay involved, meet the people. They're so excited to see you come into that neighborhood, and they are so committed and passionate about that neighborhood. So they're just waiting for you to get there and meet them.
Thanks, Pete. Both beats. Surrounded. So I'm not gonna. I want to make sure that we get to address some of your questions. I'm going to address this from a little bit of a different angle. Then everything that they said is absolutely true, and it's critically important. But just to give you the development side and the angle that I see and why I'm so attracted to places like Old Town Chinatown, like the Central East Side, because these are areas that have a great amount of potential that have not, that for one reason or another, have fallen on hard times. And as a person coming from New York and growing up in the great neighborhoods of New York, I was born in Brooklyn, I spent some time in Queens. I lived and worked in Manhattan for many years. You kind of get to understand what makes neighborhoods, communities, districts. It's really an accumulation of history. It's an accumulation of personalities. It's kind of a mixture of people. So, you know, so one of the things that I think we all tend to be trepidatious about is, you know, going into an area where there are people on the street, not necessarily people like us all the time, but other kinds of people. And I will tell you that that's just part of the makeup. I mean, if you go into Manhattan, even a lot of different areas of Manhattan, there's a wide, you know, scattering of different types of people at different socioeconomic levels. So Old Town Chinatown represents one of those areas that will always probably have that mixture. It, as OCOM and Mercy Corps and University of Oregon have come in, it's been a better balance between the street culture and the working culture. And of course, if more housing comes in, that will blend. But we never want to kind of purify it to the point where it's homogeneous. We want it to remain a vibrant area. That's part of the story, the culture, the fabric of a district. And Old Town is probably one of the strongest districts in terms of this culture and this opportunity for ethnicity and for helping. I mean, you guys are healers. And if you're going to go, I mean, when I met Michael many years ago, when we started, first was interested in the Central East Side because he walked into the East Bank Commerce Center office. Wow, this is great. This is the kind of thing. And we looked there, and we looked at a lot of them, and then somehow we ended up honing in on, I introduced him to the NATOs, and this was part of a much larger story at one point. Got filtered down to a little bit of a smart, this was at one point a 5-block redevelopment project, and times have changed, and it's filtered down to a 1 block, actually a quarter of a block that's moving right now with the potential for others. Development, quality development takes time. It's not revolution, it's evolution. You could come in and wipe down half of Old Town and put in, you know, more of a Pearl style. I like the Pearl, and I think it has a decent blend of its historic warehouse inventory. But you know, some people feel like it's become a little homogenized. I think Old Town will retain that beautiful culture, and so that it will take time, as Peter said, and as Pete said. These things do take time. This project, 4 or 5 years, what I will earn from this project, and I'll get it certified, it's probably about $3 an hour, if that, which is fine. If I live long enough, I'll probably gain a little more. But it's one of those things about giving back to a city that you love and that you've grown into, and it's part of this. It's part of the beauty of seeing things change. And you guys will be one of those seed projects that will watch as all these great things start to change, and at the same time retain its character and retain its value. So I could go on for a long time and talk about other things, but we'd much rather, I think, at this point, answer your questions. And feel free, whether it be Peter from PDC or Pete and I from Beam, to send us emails and ask us questions. We're open to try to give you as much comfort, as much information, so you can spread the word, so you can get involved. And you know, this is a city that I came to from New York. I could have gone any place else in the country that would let me in, but but I came here because of the community that's here and the opportunity to get involved. I hope I've done that, and I will try and continue. So, questions?
Not quite connected exactly to Old Town Chinatown, but one of the exciting things, obviously, is the walkability down there, and the ability to get to other places very nearby. the more I think that staff and faculty hear about what's really contiguous to where we are, the more excited they get. One of the projects that I think is going to bring a lot of value to us being down there is the public market, which is about a half mile, is that right, down the river? Can you talk a little bit about that briefly, where that is and what that's going to look like? It's probably a bigger question.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, other than